Everyone assumes Aston Martin's sudden return to the points at Zandvoort was driven by a secret aerodynamic upgrade or a hidden technical fix. But Fernando Alonso started 18th and finished 9th solely because his team nailed a one-stop strategy that exposed every other midfield runner's operational flaws. This wasn't a car development story. It was a pure execution masterclass that delivered the team's second points finish of the 2026 season without a single new component touching the asphalt. So if there was no magic update bolted onto the AMR 26 overnight, what exactly did Alonso see in the data or hear on the radio that convinced him this specific weekend marked a genuine turning point rather than just another lucky break in a chaotic race? That question hangs over everything we are about to unpack, because the answer redefines what this team is actually capable of when the variables align perfectly. The popular narrative wants you to believe that jumping 9 positions requires a fundamental shift in vehicle performance, yet the verified timeline shows 32 laps on soft tires followed by hards to the flag was the only variable that changed. Autosport framed it as perfect execution by team and driver on a day when others with quicker cars made mistakes, which forces us to ask why a team previously struggling for Q2 suddenly looked like a strategic benchmark against rivals who theoretically had more pace. You have to wonder if this result exposes a deeper issue within the rest of the grid, or if Aston Martin has simply unlocked an operational discipline that makes their raw pace irrelevant compared to their decision-making speed. The tension here isn't about whether the car is fast enough, but whether the pit wall can consistently replicate a level of precision that turned a back row start into a top 10 finish while faster machinery fell apart around them. We know the numbers don't lie. P18 to P9, 1 lap down on winner Lando Norris, ahead of Pierre Gasly, but statistics alone cannot explain the confidence in Alonso's voice when he spoke to Formula 1, calm and declared they nailed all the decisions today. That specific phrase carries a weight that generic post-race praise never does, suggesting a systemic alignment between driver feedback and engineering response that has been conspicuously absent during the team's difficult stretches earlier in 2026. When a two-time world champion explicitly validates the strategy calls rather than just his own driving, it signals a trust in the process that no wind-tunnel correlation can manufacture. He didn't say the car was magically transformed. He said the decisions were right. That distinction matters enormously for understanding where this performance actually came from. Strategy won the day. Execution mattered most. Pace was secondary. This rhythm of success feels alien for a squad that has spent much of the year fighting narratives about development plateaus and organizational restructuring. Yet here we are analyzing a result where the primary differentiator was human judgment under pressure rather than carbon fiber innovation. The fact that no source describes a car legality issue, telemetry leak, or FIA scrutiny connected to this result reinforces that we are looking at something far more sustainable and far more interesting than a temporary trick. If the improvement is attributed entirely to strategy execution and Alonso's drive, then the ceiling for this team just moved significantly higher than anyone predicted based on qualifying times alone. To fully grasp the magnitude of climbing from 18th to 9th, you have to understand just how punishing the Zandvoort circuit is on any car attempting to recover lost ground without the benefit of raw straight-line speed. The banking through Tarzan and the relentless high-speed sweepers demand a compromise in setup that usually punishes teams starting at the back. Yet Alonso managed this recovery drive to secure Aston Martin's second points finish of the 2026 season by treating tire management as an offensive weapon rather than a defensive necessity. Most drivers in that grid slot would have burned up their soft compound trying to make up positions in the opening stint. But the decision to commit to 32 laps on the red-walled rubber required a level of patience that directly contradicts the aggressive reputation of a racer chasing his first podium in years. This wasn't about passing cars on track. It was about outlasting them through superior resource allocation. Have you considered how rare it is for a team to convert a bottom 5 qualifying position into points without safety car intervention or external chaos aiding their cause? The math simply doesn't support it under normal circumstances, which is why this specific result serves as such a critical data point for evaluating the team's trajectory midway through the 2026 campaign. Securing only their second points, scoring appearance of the year highlights just how difficult this season has been for the Silverstone squad, making the precision of this particular weekend stand out in stark relief against a backdrop of missed opportunities and strategic errors elsewhere. When your margin for error is effectively zero due to starting deep in the pack, every pit stop window and every lap time delta must be executed with surgical accuracy, leaving absolutely no room for the kind of hesitation that plagued their earlier races. Points were scarce, margins were razor thin, perfection was mandatory. This brutal reality defined every communication between the cockpit and the pit wall during those crucial middle stints where the race outcome hung in the balance between extending the soft tire life or pitting early for hards and risking traffic. The fact that they emerged with 2 championship points despite starting behind cars that have shown superior single-lap pace throughout the year suggests the operational floor has risen significantly since the last time they scored. We are not talking about a fluke result born from attrition. because finishing ahead of Pierre Gasly's Alpine in P10 required active defense and consistent pace on degrading rubber, not just surviving while others retired. Let's bring the focus back to what we established right at the start regarding the absence of new parts. Because understanding that constraint makes this 18th to 9th climb even more impressive when you realize the car crossing the line was mechanically identical to the one that struggled in qualifying. The narrative shift here isn't about hardware evolution, but about maximizing existing potential through human decision-making, which fundamentally changes how we should interpret future weekends where qualifying might again go wrong. If they can extract a top 10 result from a P18 grid slot purely through strategy and driver feedback loops, then the true performance ceiling of this package remains largely untapped and potentially far higher than the current championship standings reflect. So where does that leave us regarding the team's competitive baseline moving forward? Picture this for a second. You are sitting in a garage watching 32 laps tick by on soft tires while every instinct screams that the rubber is falling off a cliff. Yet you have to trust a pre-race simulation over your own eyes because the alternative is pitting early and getting swallowed by traffic. That specific psychological burden is what separated Aston Martin from the rest of the midfield at Zandvoort, as Autosport described the result as perfect execution by team and driver on a day when others with quicker cars make mistakes. The one-stop strategy wasn't just a tactical choice, but a declaration of confidence in tire management that faster teams simply could not match when the pressure mounted. They had the pace advantage on paper, but lacked the operational discipline to convert it, burning through their compounds or misjudging the crossover point while Alonso's crew held their nerve through the most critical phase of the Grand Prix. Softs lasted longer, hards performed better, others blinked first. This sequence of events turned a theoretical disadvantage into a tangible track position gain that no amount of horsepower could recover once the pit window slammed shut. The 32-lap opening stint on the softer compound required Alonso to drive within a specific delta that preserved enough thermal life to make the switch to hards viable, a balancing act that demands absolute synergy between steering wheel feedback and engineering analysis. When rivals with superior straight-line speed opted for conventional two-stop approaches or pushed too hard early on, they inadvertently handed Aston Martin the strategic initiative without realizing it until the final stint unfolded. The mistake wasn't mechanical failure or driver error in the traditional sense, but rather a failure of conviction in their own race model when confronted with an outlier performance from a car they expected to beat comfortably. What does it actually tell us about the 2026 competitive hierarchy when a team starting 18th can out-strategize machinery that qualified seconds ahead? It suggests that raw lap time has become a depreciating currency in a season where operational efficiency and adaptability now weigh heavier than peak performance metrics alone. The fact that Autosport specifically highlighted the errors of quicker cars reinforces that this result was earned through comparative competence rather than inherited through external misfortune, marking a distinct evolution in how Aston Martin approaches weekends where qualifying doesn't go according to plan. They didn't get lucky because someone else crashed or suffered a penalty. They won the strategic battle outright against opponents who had every objective advantage except decision-making clarity under stress. This brings us back to the core reality we flagged at the very beginning about the absence of technical upgrades, because recognizing that context makes the strategic mastery even more significant as a standalone achievement. The 32-lap soft stint wasn't enabled by a new suspension geometry or revised floor edge, but by extracting maximum value from existing components through refined usage patterns and real-time adaptation. So where does that leave the rest of the midfield if Aston Martin can consistently replicate this level of execution without needing development updates to bridge the gap? Speaking directly to Formula 1.com, Alonso stated they nailed all the decisions today, a specific commendation of the pit wall strategy calls that carries far more analytical weight than generic post-race satisfaction. This wasn't vague praise for effort or teamwork in the abstract, it was a precise validation of the 32-lap soft stint and the hard tire switch point as the decisive factors in securing P9. Separately, he told ESPN the car felt lovely, a descriptor that speaks to mechanical balance and drivability rather than peak downforce levels, suggesting the existing AMR26 platform has always possessed a usable operating window that only fully emerged when strategic clarity removed the guesswork from his race management. When a driver with over 20 seasons of experience chooses those exact words through official media channels, it signals a fundamental alignment between cockpit feedback and engineering response that had been conspicuously fractured during earlier rounds of 2026. Feedback loops clicked, communication flowed, doubts evaporated. This synchronization is what actually enabled the recovery drive, because without absolute trust in the strategy calls, no amount of individual talent can compensate for a compromised race plan on a circuit as unforgiving as Zandvoort. The loveliness he described to ESPN likely refers to a car that remained predictable through the high-speed banking even as the soft tires degraded past their expected performance cliff, allowing him to maintain the precise delta required to make the one-stop viable. Had the balance shifted unexpectedly or the rear stability deteriorated faster than modeled, that 32-lap target would have collapsed regardless of how perfectly the pit wall executed their side of the equation. Driver confidence and operational precision are interdependent variables, not separate contributors to success. What separates this result from previous near misses is that both elements peaked simultaneously for the first time this season, creating a compound effect that neither could achieve independently. The fact that these quotes came through Formula 1, Com, and ESPN rather than private team briefings suggests Aston Martin recognizes this moment as a public benchmark for their operational maturity heading into the final third of 2026. They are no longer hiding behind development timelines or upgrade schedules as explanations for inconsistency. They are claiming ownership of execution as their primary competitive differentiator. So where does that leave us when assessing whether this level of synergy is sustainable across varying track characteristics and tire compounds?